Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hawkcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I'm a recruiting analyst and host, Eliot Clough, at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby and managing editor Ross Binder here on this Wednesday morning. You lose track of time when you're up until 2 a.m. covering basketball and also the craziness. That was actually the only thing that happened yesterday, guys. I don't know if you knew that. Kadyn Proctor, the big news, of course. He, by all reports, and including a statement from Kirk, he is leaving the Iowa football program again, I guess one could say, and will transfer back to Alabama. I don't even know where to start because the mind goes so many different places. Like why, how, when, where, and so many reactions, so many things of like, did he get money from the Swarm, which we'll talk about here momentarily. But Adam, I'm going to start with you of that moment when you see the article because Scott Docterman was the first one to report from the Athletic. So when you see that article come across your timeline, what's your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was pure disbelief because you could have given me 100 guesses that afternoon what the big breaking news out of the Iowa football program would have been. I would not have gotten to, I don't think I would have gotten to Kadyn Proctor transferring, much less transferring back to Alabama. And it really does seem like this was a very recent development. And according to the report by Doctorman, like Proctor had just gone on spring break with some of his old teammates from Alabama. And now with spring football, well, starting today, he decided that he wasn't going to be a part of that, decided he wasn't going to be part of the program, and decided, back to Tuscaloosa in that sort of fashion. And it really boggles the mind. After just 2 months ago, he was talking about how Iowa is home and how the stars in the line and he was happy to be welcome back and all of that. Everybody was expecting that to be the case and for him to be the sort of source of stability on that offensive line there at tackle. And so for that to just take that hard 180, you don't expect to see that in football. But part of it is because this is the new normal in college football, and it is not a sustainable normal at all. And we can get into that in a little bit, but he's doing this for, among other reasons, because he can. And it kind of feels like an athlete maybe shouldn't be able to do this, but we can unpack all of that too. But yeah, to answer your question, outright disbelief. And even as we're sorting through the information as we get it, it's still pretty hard to believe. Ross, what have you gathered from this?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I think my first reaction was similar to yours in terms of like kind of surprise and disbelief. Like, wait, really? Because the memories of him at that Iowa women's game or Iowa men's game, whatever it was in December. The all his quotes and comments about happy to be back home. It really seemed like this was a thing. But honestly, my next reaction after that initial like shock of and then processing it was like, well, yeah, it's Bama. Like it's Alabama. They're the premier program in college football of the 21st century. Yeah, even without Nick Saban, they still have the history, the pedigree, and in terms of the money, they have some deep pockets among their fan base, and that didn't shock me. And then the fact that he was there for a year. He's got friends, he's got connections on that team, on that program. He started, I believe, every game last year, so he will presumably walk right back into that left tackle position for Alabama. And if he would like to contend for playoff spots and championships. I cannot blame him for thinking that Alabama is a better platform to do that than Iowa. So yeah, I think my initial reaction was similar to yours, but maybe it's just cynicism. But it's like, oh yeah, I guess this makes sense. I mean, it's Alabama, it's the money, it's the SEC. Like that part of it, I guess, made sense to me and did not seem surprising. I guess if he had said I'm bouncing from Iowa and I'm going to go transfer to Nebraska, I'd be like, really? What's going on there? But yeah, going back to Alabama, that part I guess does not shock me really. But yeah, did not see this coming at all. I agree that if you asked me to name off what's going to happen in the Iowa football program, this would have been way down the list for sure.
So I'll tell you, I'll counterpoint here, Ross, regarding him going back to Alabama, of which all of your points are incredibly valid. The counterpoint would be, okay, you look at it, he's leaving again. So this will be the second time he enters the portal in as many months, 2 months, 3 months, to go back to a school that has a different coaching staff. It's not Nick Saban. It's Kalen DeBoer, who has spent 2 months in Tuscaloosa. I mean, they largely have a former Hoosier coaching staff, Indiana coaching staff at Alabama. Didn't even bring Ryan Grubb with him because Grubb, well, he was going to be there. Now the OC with the Seattle Seahawks. This is unprecedented because of the decision to transfer again within 2 months, but to not only open up the possibility of going elsewhere, like Clemson, like Texas, like Oklahoma, where they can also give him a bag, where they can also offer the SEC, where they can also offer playoff appearances. Yeah, obviously Clemson can't offer the SEC, but LSU, right? And coaches that have been established and had some success, right? I guess new staffs at all three of those schools, actually, but still more established than Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. And like you mentioned, Adam, sure, he went on the spring break with some of his other friends. And what we can glean from that is that, well, they probably did some convincing. Talk to him a little bit about Kalen DeBoer and what it's like at Alabama. But to do this is fundamentally unprecedented. I can't think of another scenario where this has happened before. So to me, I guess the connection to Alabama, the connection to potentially winning championships makes sense. At the same time, he had options to do that at other places. He had probably had options to get the bag elsewhere. And so to me, there's got to be something else to this story that we're not seeing. And of course, this is purely speculation. The next latter part of this conversation, this next part of the conversation, purely speculation. We're still working out the details, but something must have gone awry, something that he didn't expect, something that we just aren't aware of, right? Like, is that the way you guys are reading into it?
To an extent, yeah. Because, like you said, Eliot, his opportunities were going to be fantastic wherever he went. And Clemson would have loved to have, or LSU or Ohio State or Nebraska or USC, like all of these schools who had recruited Proctor out of Southeast Polk would have loved another shot at recruiting him in. So for him to go back to follow his teammates, his former teammates, down to wherever they went to spring break, and then basically to follow them back to Tuscaloosa, more or less, tells me that it was, a sort of a connection with those players as opposed to a connection with like you said, Eliot, a brand new coaching staff who had spent zero time ever coaching him. So that would indicate that there's something there. The swiftness with how all of this went down, Eliot, you had mentioned on the premium board that one of your sources was like, what? That it took a lot of people by surprise. And so that tells me too that this was not really something that had been bubbling up. This was not a like structural problem that he had had with the coaching staff or anything like that. And one distinction that I think does sort of illustrate how Proctor was never really all in Iowa City. Brad Heinrichs of the Swarm mentioned that Kadyn Proctor hadn't gotten a dime of the Swarm collective money. And the distinction between Swarm Inc. and Swarm Collective is the fan donations go to the collective. And Proctor hadn't gotten any of that yet, which means that Proctor hadn't been doing the public service, the charity work that these athletes across all Iowa sports get compensated for. And I think that's a very important point because, Eliot, how many times in the last 12 months have we talked to Iowa players, especially Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson? I think we hear it the most from those two guys. But as Nick got reacclimated or got acclimated for the first time with the program, one of the things he mentioned was the time that they spent hanging out and doing these, charity projects, these essentially swarm projects, donating their time and growing together as a group through that. And so if we turn around and hear that Proctor had not been doing that charity work, then that tells me that he hadn't been starting that acclimation process with the team, doing the same things that those other guys are doing. And so, yeah, he goes on spring break with a bunch of guys who are not his teammates. That sort of tells me that he had never really been bought in with this program to begin with. And yeah, spring practice hadn't even started. He had never practiced with this team to begin with. So it's not as if there's this presence that the team had sort of galvanized around. He hadn't proven himself to be a leader on the field because there was no opportunity to prove it as yet. He was basically barely even there as a Hawkeye at all, on or off the field. Well, he couldn't be on the field. So when they mentioned that he hadn't been paid out of the collective, one, fans should be happier about that. But two, that says, all right, he was never bought in to begin with. And talent or not, you want talent in Iowa City, but you need it bought in. And if he's not 100% willing to be a Hawkeye, then all right, Tuscaloosa's back over there. But you can't win on the field if you're not 100% bought in. You just can't. So tough situation, but I thought that was pretty illuminating. Elliot, do you agree with that read?
Yes. And to that point, to make that decision within 2 months and literally the day before spring practice starts is really, I think, telling of that investment that you mentioned, Adam. Like, is this something you really wanted to do? Because what we were told 2 months ago is this is home. This is ultimately where I wanted to be. And truthfully, I'll be completely frank here. I feel a hesitancy in criticizing I'm assuming he's 19, 20-year-old. But I think I speak on behalf of the fan base here when I say you get the benefit of the doubt when you're 18 and this is the first time you make this decision on signing day. You make that flip, right?
Mhm.
that he did to Alabama. To do it again in less than a year and a half is where you lose that benefit of the doubt. Now, there are still some outlandish things that I will not endorse that I saw on Twitter that are just absolutely insane. But this is where you lose that benefit of the doubt to me at 19, 20 years old. Because as dumb as I think we can all agree we all are at 19, 20 years old, Kadyn Proctor is aware of the situation. He had done it once before. And like, if he's going to be happy at Alabama, if that's where he's going to feel fully invested, and you're not going to be that fully invested at Iowa, go, man. Like, just go. At the same time, it didn't really feel like he gave it what he should have, I guess, or he gave it his all in this return. Because if this was something you really wanted, if this was something that you really wanted to do, really Iowa's a place you really wanted to be, then you would have stuck it out through spring ball at the least, right? Not 2 months. I saw a tweet that said Chris Humphrey's Kim Kardashian marriage, 72 days. Kadyn Proctor in Iowa, 59 days.
Oh my God.
So I think, well, first of all, I was laughing really hard at that. Second of all, it's I don't know. It's so hard to read with as little information we have, right? One thing that was said to me by another media member is like, is this just a emotion of the moment decision, right? Like I'm sure he had a lot of friends and happiness at Alabama and like by all means totally understand that. But did he actually give Iowa a shot? And for folks to say, well, he wasn't happy here. Well, one, he was here for 59 days. That's that's not a like the resources are here, right? The people that he Xavier's here. Like the people that he knew would be here are here. And you can't tell me it's not like he didn't know enough about the program. When he was being recruited, he was in Iowa City all the time. He knows these people. He knows George Barnett. He knows Kirk Ferentz. He knows, well, his high school teammate, right? Like if the effort was to be put there to fit in, to be here, and it's not like the Iowa football program would have seen what was going on or actively not tried to make him comfortable, right?
Right. Right.
They're not, oh, we got a 5-star left tackle. Our offensive line sucks. We got to do everything we can to make this guy happy, comfortable, and want to be here. This largely, obviously, we kind of have to assume something else is going on, right? Whether what that is, we don't know. But from what I can glean, from what we can glean, this appears to say more about Kadyn Proctor than it does about the Iowa football program. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah. The it's a rough way to be a teammate. We'll put it that way. It's there's one person sent me a note that said, and I'm not endorsing this level of vitriol, but you understand it when they said it would be better if Kadyn didn't set foot in the state of Iowa from here on out. And like again, often I want folks to sort of tone this down, but I get it. I really get it because this is twice to be like, you know what, like on the day of or the day prior to say, actually, damn, it's going to work out better for me. Hope you guys sort it out. Like, great, bye, see ya. Once again, like Eliot, like you said, you get it. It's a kid, and none of us were making smart decisions when we were 17, or shouldn't have been asked to. Twice, when you're fully acutely aware of how rotten it is or how rough it is for the fan base, when you mention it publicly, when you say, yeah, I'm glad that we were able to put it past us. So he knows what the it to be put past everybody is. to not only do it again, but when the first way that you acknowledge it publicly is to hop on your Instagram stories and go with the MJ, I'm back. Like MJ came back from retirement. It's not like he was coming back from like the Supersonics or something like that. Like
in 2 months.
In
2 months.
Yeah. Like there were thousands upon thousands of Iowa fans who follow Proctor on Instagram, who probably were not on Twitter to see like the
Lystico.
Yeah, I should know this. I've said his name publicly so often. Like, but who hadn't seen the Lystico tweet or the Doctorman story yet? There are so many Iowa fans that's how they found out. Was his story, and it was just I'm back, not I'm sorry Iowa, not a this was a difficult decision, not a I've really learned a lot about myself and this is where my heart is and this and that, and I'm sorry for what I did to my teammates. Like there's some contrition that would really go a long way in restoring Kadyn Proctor's good name in the locker room in Iowa City, in the state of Iowa as a whole, and doesn't look like he's anywhere close to that. And so that's going to rub some folks the wrong way for a long time. And I think if he wants any of that goodwill back, he's going to have to be a little bit accountable for it and a little bit greater sense of it than I'm back. Again, if Tuscaloosa is where he wants to be, all right. And the fact that he didn't get any fan money out of it, and like if all he got was a car dealership's like a few $1,000s from a car dealership, all right. Like not the worst thing that's going to happen in all this sort of situation. One thing that Doctorman pointed out, Lystico pointed out, though, it's a situation right now with NIL where something bad could have happened. He could have taken a lot more money from the NIL and bounced without repercussion. It's a testament to the way the swarm is set up that he didn't get any fan donation money. But and I don't think that there's anything untoward that Brad and the swarm have done here or have done ever. So don't say that I'm casting aspersions upon them in general, but just NIL, the collective funds as an institution, as a way to get money to athletes. We are talking about the same thing that got SMU the death penalty back in the early 80s. It's a slush fund. It's a fund controlled by other people to like pay out to certain people. Like the money comes in, they decide where it goes. And the NCAA did not want it in and around its athletes for kind of obvious reasons. Like there's conflicts of interest that pop up. But there's only so many ways that legally you can control how all of these transactions happen. So I don't think Proctor got one over bad on Iowa fans or on the participating partners or anything like that. Like I don't think that he, got enough money to really cause problems, but I think he demonstrated that he could have. I think that if there were a less scrupulous NIL group operating than the Swarm, he probably would have been able to get a lot more money a lot quicker without even being able to, like this, the NIL group can't even enforce any of that contractually on the condition of him playing a down or a snap at Iowa or at any other school. And so that problem, regardless of how much money Kadyn got, that problem is looming huge over all of this. And that is something that needs to be resolved independent of any details of this situation. So is this the step that pushes college sports closer to collective bargaining? I kind of hope so, because especially what this has done to the fan base, especially in this era of the transfer portal is open and now it's this objective process. The NCAA is not really able to enforce eligibility penalties for multi-time transfers anymore because they kick that can down the road legally for so often too. There needs to be a structure so that something like this can't really happen for financial reasons, for team building reasons, for any number of academically, it's not even a good idea either. Like, let's throw out this idea that any of this is a good idea for Kadyn Proctor, the future college graduate. Like, all of this is sort of exposing some real structural problems with where college amateurism is now. And I think we're not going to get to a sustainable place until there's collective bargaining. It seems inescapable, doesn't it?
Okay. A lot of things to hit there. I'll talk classes because this is something I was thinking of too. Academics. Is he just gonna be in Iowa City with college students who are gonna hate his guts for 2 months?
I would not be one like he's also 6'8", 380. So
That too.
they
That
can
right.
hate all they want.
Yeah, I can't forget that. Can't forget the measurables. At the same time,
But yeah,
there is safety in a crowd. We'll say that. Two, what I will say as well is the majority of college football players strictly take online classes in NCAA D1 football, at least at the high major, the Power 5 level. So I imagine that's what he's doing. Does that mean he'll pick up and move to Tuscaloosa tomorrow? I don't know what that entails. I certainly wouldn't blame him. You don't really want to go back to Southeast Polk, do you? At this rate? I mean,
no, if you don't want to be in Iowa City, I don't think you want to be in semi-rural Iowa
right.
over the next month either. But I
That's
also
true.
don't know, like, if he's not able to enroll at Alabama until April or whenever, I don't think he's able to practice with the team. I could be wrong, but I
No.
don't know where eligibility lets you be for like practice things.
Right. And
But I don't think that he can do a whole lot with the team before he's able to be a student there again.
and so he can't technically enter the portal until April 16th, I
15 or
believe.
16, yeah, one of
15th
the
or
two.
16th. Yeah.
Yeah. Either way,
So
4 weeks from now, which is practically an eternity at this point.
yeah, and it's not like he can be in contact with the staff at Alabama exactly to even get workouts, right? Like, wouldn't that be tampering technically, even if he's in a no contact? Well, I guess he's not technically in the portal. So, is this another situation where some like this is just so messy in so many ways? Like,
Yeah.
academics too. Like I really don't know. And when we talked to him at the basketball game, he wasn't sure what it was going to look like for him to be in classes, but he was going to be in classes sooner rather than later. He did tell us that. Um, and that is where I mean, I don't know. Can he be eligible for the fall? Like with that in mind? I don't know. Ross, it looks like you have something to say.
I didn't, but that's all
Oh,
right.
I saw you unmute your mic, so I wanted to
No,
go.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know. In terms of the eligibility, I'm sure he can just maintain whatever coursework he's doing at Iowa, finish that for this semester, or I doubt he could transfer it to Alabama at this point in the semester, but finish that to retain his eligibility. Probably, who knows? In terms of everything else, you mentioned this being unprecedented, and it really is because of that decision that the NCAA made to enable multi-time transfers, essentially. Like, this doesn't happen if Proctor can't go back to Alabama and be immediately eligible. Like,
Yeah.
he would actually be going to practice at Iowa and probably actually be engaging in the community or whatever, because it's like, well, I can't go anywhere else and play right now, so I'm here. I probably got to at least try this and make the most of it for the time being. But the current rules do kind of enable you to keep one foot. You can dip a toe in, but still keep a foot somewhere else. And I'd like to go back. God, I sound terrible. I'd like to go back to Alabama, or he could have gone to USC, Ohio State, whatever. And that is a function of the current landscape and the current rules that he can just float wherever, essentially. And he's a high profile case that we are obviously extremely aware of because of its effect on the Iowa football program. He is assuredly not the only one doing this. He will not be the only one doing this in the future, unless the NCAA is able to, do something to limit that, which they're unlikely to do absent the collective bargaining that Adam mentioned, because enforcing it via their own rules is an invitation for lawsuits.
I'm eating a protein bar as we speak. Sorry.
A real
Regarding
cliffhanger.
What'd you say?
A real cliffhanger.
Oh God.
See,
Okay. Boo. Now, regarding the situation, Adam, you said something. Remind me. You said something. We were talking about academics, and then there was another piece included in there that you said. Can you remind me what that was? I had a point to make.
So what was the point I was making?
Here we are, the wonderful world of podcasting. Okay, so you think on that?
I had like five in the chamber too, and they've all just sort of dissipated. It's early, folks.
Yeah,
we're caffeinating as we speak. It's been a long night, but yeah, it does seem like, even if this is or isn't precedented, certainly it's the most high profile instance of this sort of back and forth happening, and certainly the most high impact instance of it. The fact, Ross, you are absolutely right, and I think that really does require sort of a bigger emphasis, is that this is almost assuredly not happening if Proctor were not eligible to play at Bama next year. That there used to be, at the very least, some disincentive to bouncing between schools, especially more than once. Like there is that academic aspect of it that ostensibly does exist. Like you never hear about guys who are academically ineligible or like with insufficient grades anymore. Like you just don't hear about it, which is, I don't know, like seems a little odd that nobody ever gets under a 2.0 in college if they're a student athlete ever. But it does seem like, with a little bit of reason to stick around, to actually go to practice, to actually like become part of the team for 12 months, before you're eligible to transfer again or what have you, that at the very least creates an environment where Proctor can, acclimate himself within the program, can say, all right, I've got these, however long with the team, this one season where I'm locked in at Iowa, let's see how it goes. And, you spend that amount of time on a team, you want to come back. You get bought into them, they get bought into you. That's how, we're talking about the basic dynamics of teamwork at that point. So there does need to somehow, some way, within a legal framework, because apparently the NCAA is losing lawsuits in terms of what student athlete amateurism is, with alarming efficiency. But that's what happens when you don't engage the athletes where they are at any point through the course of this, because it's a like, no, no money for you, no money for you, no nothing for you. And that worked for a while, had, legal backing for a while, but ultimately it's not free market competitive. Many would say not American, like it doesn't embody capitalist values. So
Adam, Adam, it was like 10 years ago that it was a big deal when they could offer like cream cheese on bagels to athletes.
right, right.
Like,
And it was about that long ago that Jim Delaney, when the first auspices of like what happens if athletes do get money, that he said, well, then the Big Ten's going to go D3, that we're just not going
yeah.
to offer scholarships. That, I mean, clearly did not happen. But that's the way the NCAA approached any notion of some like athlete A being able to recognize their worth before they go pro. And there's something to the notion of amateurism, like it cropped up to protect college level players from being beaten up on, especially in football, in early 20th century football. Like it was a necessity for safety. But now there's so much money in college sports. The money is there because the athletes are good, because the athletes are worth paying for, that they're worth televising. That money has to come back to them too, because and all of this money, all of the decades of eligibility scandals and improper payments and SMU and the slush fund and all, like, the value of these athletes has always been there. The NCAA tried to legislate it away by punishing people who gave money, by punishing the athletes who took it, I mean, Christ, Ross, what was it? Maybe 15 years ago that no, it wasn't even 15 years ago that OSU, Jim Tressel lost his job for players getting autographs and like giving away little trinkets and trading them for tattoos. Again, stuff that is now fine. It's normal. And it should be. So yeah, this is a long history by the NCAA of trying to protect these guys from their value as athletes. It never worked that way, but it also removed the opportunity to engage that discussion in good faith, to engage that, like, all right, let's acknowledge that these guys or these athletes, these women, in terms of like Caitlin Clark, are worth televising, and we get money because of how good they are at sports, and so they're valuable to us for that reason. Like, again, these are basic economic concepts that the NCAA and its schools have fought and fought and fought against because they don't want to deal with it. And look, this is what they're reaping from that. This situation where some of the like bedrocks of student athlete amateurism are legally untenable, and the opportunities to collectively bargain with athletes and find a situation where this Proctor thing never happens. The opportunity for those discussions had been for decades. The NCAA kicked that can down the road, and now here we are. This needs to be fixed. The academic calendar, the TV, like, all of this is out of whack. Collective bargaining will bring this into better focus and let's just be blunt about this, keep schools like Iowa from getting screwed by recruits over NIL money and bagmen and here and there ever again. That's how this stops.
So I think I had my point was regarding this decision to transfer and then transfer again. I think that I imagine that's part of this collective bargaining talk that you're having here, Adam, because I believe the NCAA legit like allowed unlimited transfers, or that was something that was a conversation for a while. Is that a thing that is true now? That's allowed?
Yeah, that's why
Immediate
Proctor's
eligibility.
eligible at Alabama to go
That's
back this
okay.
year.
That's what I
Yep.
thought.
And it was more or less a like, they understood that they were probably not going to be able to enforce an eligibility ban in the courts.
Oh, okay.
So their statement was very cagey and cautious, but it was like, and ultimately we believe this is fairer. And from what we've understood from the NCAA in years past, that means that their hand was played for them. I'm not as up on where the lawsuit situations are. There's multiple of them against the NCAA, and they haven't been going the NCAA's way in years. So
Right.
I think
So
this is related to that. Go on.
it's trying to establish a non-compete when you're actively saying that these guys aren't employees.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so as much I think I've referenced this a few times. I did on our last podcast, I believe, is that it's frustrating the way with which college sports have become professionalized in so many ways and are going to continue to be that way because of situations like this. And it's like the NCAA is so repeatedly incompetent, like in so many ways. And this is exhibit A, right? Like, and I also hate to put this fully on the NCAA, but there's two factors to this. This again, I will say this is more about Kadyn Proctor than it is about the NCAA, at least in my
Mhm.
opinion. This says this whole situation is more about Kadyn Proctor as opposed to the rules at hand, but at the same time, it happened because of the rules at hand, like you have repeatedly said, Adam. And
Yeah.
that's so indicative. Like the whole Noah Shannon situation, the thing that happened with the receiver at North Carolina. Then we're talking about all of these different things where they've set themselves up to fail by way of trying to screw athletes over and take every bit of money that they possibly can because they're amateurs. They can't do it. Oh my God. If they sell a trinket that's autographed for $20, I swear the world's going to explode. And look where it set us, look what it set us up for.
Take away full rides immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, all you have to do is look at how well Caitlin Clark's NIL eligibility and
Yep.
availability has done for the University of Iowa. It has been tremendous for Iowa's ability to advertise itself that Nike is splashing Caitlin Clark everywhere, and State Farm is able to like splash her everywhere wearing her Iowa jersey. Like that is such a boon for these schools that why they resisted this opportunity to build NIL eligibility into an amateurism framework that works and to build some sort of Title IX equitable payout situation where certain, sports get certain benefits because they earn more TV money. Like there's ways to make this equitable. Like people earn different wages for different jobs and it's not a Title IX violation, right? So everyone just needs to start being honest about what these athletes are. They're student athletes and they're employees of the university, and they represent the university every time they put those jerseys on and go on national television and represent the school and play for a coach who represents the school. I mean, that is labor they're doing on behalf of the university. Again, the most basic of economic concepts that we're talking about here. And so many opportunities lost to engage that in a good faith, proactive way. And yeah, Eliot, this is ultimately about Kadyn Proctor and his decision. It is about the freedom that he has to make that decision. And in the pro leagues, guys are not able to do this. Like the commitments go both ways. And that is something that is not, that both way commitment is not built into the NCAA anymore. It's not for players and it's not for coaches. That's its own separate thing. But the whole point of a collective bargaining situation is not to screw over the schools, it's to get it to a situation where everyone can agree this is the framework that athletes commit to, that coaches commit to, and that schools commit to. And that is the stability that you get. That stability cannot be a one-sided dictum coming from the ivory towers in Indianapolis anymore. Those days are gone. The athletes have economic power. The advertisers have economic power. The TV networks have academic power. And as long as the money continues to dictate how college sports go, and good luck trying to get the money out of college sports. Good luck getting one university to agree to any of that. As long as that's the case, that has to be part of the conversation, and all of the stakeholders have to be part of that conversation, or else the next Kadyn Proctor, the even less scrupulous next great athlete who wants to do something like this, he's just going to find the easier sap than Swarm and Brad Heinrichs and the University of Iowa, because I can guarantee you there's some easier saps out there in the NCAA than what's going on in Iowa City. And there's bigger money, there's bigger fish, and there's even bigger athletes who are going to be able to take bigger, advantage of this situation. Like the next school is just going to be the sitting duck until this is resolved. And the last thing that I'll point out, Eliot, yeah, it's mostly about Kadyn Proctor. It's also about the rules. But I think what this also sort of proves is that it's not a reflection of the University of Iowa. It's not a reflection of Kirk Ferentz. It's not a reflection of any of the people running the Iowa program itself. I think Iowa has come out of this about as clean as you could ask for. Swarm even, I would say, has come out about as clean as you could ask for. So, Iowa fans shouldn't be sort of self-conscious about this. This is a guy who took advantage of the situation to, again, if he got like $5,000 from a car dealership, all right. Like he did some social media things, all right. But Iowa should feel clean about it, but I'm not sure college sports should feel clean about it, if that makes sense. Ross, do you have anything else on this?
I do not. I think you summed it up very nicely, Adam, that this is, ultimately a bigger story than Kadyn Proctor. He's our focus as a Iowa podcast, as it were, and him being a now former Iowa athlete. But this situation does involve so many other larger issues and factors, and it speaks to the potential for even worse abuses of the system, like you mentioned, that there is just a lot to unpack and a lot of consequences and things that we will see from this decision, or from decisions like this, that I think will have a dramatic impact on how college sports are kind of governed and structured, essentially, in the not too distant future. The reckoning is coming sooner rather than later, for sure.
Well, if there were any silver lining, Iowa doesn't have to worry about one of those extra scholarships. I made that joke last night, and I hate that I made it again. That was painful. Um,
Yeah. Everyone listening is like, too soon.
yeah, right. Now, there's gonna be fallout from this on the field as well. Iowa's offensive line struggled this last year. I can't imagine with a Mason Richmond is a 3 at this going into this season. If assuming he's left tackle again, this would be his 4th year starting at left tackle. And I don't know that he's exactly gotten better. So there is going to be some fallout there, at least better to the degree that Iowa fans would hope from a left tackle at the University of Iowa. We'll say that.
Yeah,
Um,
he's not playing at an all Big Ten level at this point for as long as he's spent starting on that line. And there is a little bit of expectation that if you get that much playing time, that's the level that you reach. And yeah, Eliot, I don't think that we saw a better Mason Richmond this year than we did last year. And that is almost tough to manage. Like he did have some, you know, lingering injuries, and there were some games he played where he was not at 100%. But Proctor's value to this program, as much as anything, was the step up in quality that he represented over Richmond, or as the case might be, Jack Dotzler at left tackle.
yeah. And so Trevor Lauk, maybe. We literally just got word from the roster changes that Trevor Lauk wasn't going to be 74 anymore. And now I'm curious if he'll stay. He's flipped to 59, I think. So we'll see if he gets his number back. Anywho, we'll have more speculation. We'll have more talk of that fallout on Iowa.rivals.com as spring practices start today. Yeah, we'll see how things shake out there. Of course, we've got a tab or a running tab of visitors to spring practice, high school recruits that will be on campus for visits throughout the spring. If you want to check that out, see who those players are, those recruits are, you can join us at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. If you're not a subscriber yet, we would love to have you. You can get all that inside information on recruiting from us. Additionally, I mean, I'll float this out there. And again, this is something we can continue to talk more about on iowa.rivals.com as we continue writing. But is this a scenario where we see Iowa dip back into the portal after the spring? Because this is a scenario where if your offensive line isn't better, the RPO is going to struggle, especially in its first year.
Yeah. And we know that Iowa was clearly in the market for an experienced left tackle in the transfer portal. So that need has obviously not gone away. It wouldn't surprise me.
It has
But yeah,
resurfaced, so to speak.
yes.
So, and that's a situation where you don't turn the opportunity down to bring in Kadyn Proctor. There's a lot of factors there. So it's like, oh crap, he's in the portal. Let's go get him. Is it a situation where they may have another connection to somebody else who enters the portal later on? Maybe. So maybe they don't go out and get an offensive lineman in the portal too, just because they're strapped for scholarships. Which again, we will have content on that coming up here. They got to get down to that 85 scholarship number. Adam is currently working on that. That's going to shed some light on the situation, and of course, our premium subscribers will have all the access to that. They can ask questions to us about the situation and more. We've got some really good information on that, and we will be moving forward with it. Now, anything else to hit on this subject, spring ball, Kadyn Proctor, before we talk a little men's NIT and then hop out of here? No? All right. Let's do it. So, men's NIT last night. They get the win over Kansas State in that first round of the NIT. They defeated the Wildcats 91-82. And that was the best basketball they've played in quite a while. There was pop to the ball. Peyton Sandfort set career highs in points, in three-pointers made, and he tied his career high in rebounds. Yep. So great night for Peyton. To me, he came out and was like, we're not laying down and dying. And that's what I expected from this game. If you listen to my appearance with what's Spencer's last name? It was Spencer on Sports on the ESPN affiliate in Cedar Rapids. I joined him yesterday at 4:30 and gave my expectations for the game. And I really thought, based on what we saw against Illinois and Ohio State, that Iowa was just gonna call her good, and that'd be that for the 2024 or 2023-2024 season. But they came out firing on all cylinders. Peyton Sandfort specifically, 17 points in the first 7.5 minutes. I think at one point he was on pace to score 120 points. So he was on fire really from the get-go. Finished with a career high in 30. Ben Krikke was awesome, especially in the second half. 21 of his 24 points. Really benefited from Peyton's. They started face guarding Peyton. And if you missed it, I put it on Twitter. There's a video of Jerome Tang, Kansas State head coach, saying that during their scouting report, they referred to Peyton as their men's version of Caitlin Clark. And they didn't act like it in the first half at all. And Peyton just killed them. He was awesome last night. And you can tell the NIT matters to this team. That was my third point, our three takeaways. My three takeaways post last night is that you can tell this NIT matters to this team. Could you tell that too, Ross?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was clear just in the intensity they played with, which, like you said, in your kind of media hit before the game, would they have that intensity? Because they kind of didn't against Illinois and Ohio State. It wasn't totally there. They got down big early, just not that same energy that they needed on defense and rebounding. And that showed in the final result. And last night, that was not the case. There was that energy they needed. They were, getting rebounds, getting some stops, getting out in transition, and making shots was obviously the biggest difference. Like, they could not buy a shot against Illinois, and they struggled a lot against Ohio State as well. Finally made some shots last night, so that, I'm sure gave them some confidence too. But yeah, definitely, like, these were guys that, they said in post game after those losses, we want to keep playing. We don't want our season to be over. We're invested still. And it was, I think, fair to question that a little bit based on what they had looked like in those games. But you also have to look at, give them credit for the way they played last night then, because the way they looked in that game was 100% like a team that did not want their season to be over, wanted to keep playing, wanted to keep winning. And that was completely on display. And, you mentioned Ben Krikke too. I just kind of wanted to highlight that he was phenomenal. He's gotten a lot of criticism over the back half of the season, and not unwarranted, because the performances haven't been there in several games. But Iowa doesn't win that game last night without Krikke and the way he played the second half. I mean, 21 second half points was huge, because, like you said, I guess K-State maybe read their scouting report at halftime. Like, they're like, oh crap, we got to defend Peyton Sandfort. We forgot about that in the first half, but we're going to do it now. So he was not getting the easy shots in the second half. And so the Iowa needed some other guys to step up, and Krikke did. And then he had 12 rebounds. I mean, that was huge. The rebounding thing has not always been there for him, not often been there for him this season. There have been, games where he just wasn't getting that many rebounds at all. And he was hitting the glass hard last night, and it had a big effect. It was, he was helping keep possessions alive on offense, and on defense, getting boards to get Iowa out in transition, get things going. So, really great game for him. Great game for Peyton Sandfort. And I just, impressive that, like you said, they want to keep playing. And that was very much apparent from that performance, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was especially instructive that Sandfort said after the game that it sort of felt to him that he was screwing around, or like on the court, that he was just sort of freewheeling it, but that he felt also locked into the game plan, that he was, making good basketball decisions. He was, getting himself into the right spot. Ball was moving quickly. So that's the way that you would want him to play, and that you sort of have to play in a Fran McCaffrey system, which is, controlled chaos and make the shots that are in front of you. Now, Peyton's not going to make 7 out of 11 3-pointers in every game. And if he does, build a statue for him and put it right next to Caitlin and Lisa and everybody else. But even if he's not shooting 63% from deep, game in and game out, that effort that he brings, that intensity, like the comparison, Eliot, that you mentioned with Caitlin Clark was notable to me, not only because you never hear male coaches refer to male players as, female equivalents. You hear that comparison go the other way a lot, but not the other direction. But it's nice that we can move past that being sort of a like barrier for male coaches and male media members too. Like, and it's also nice because it's an appropriate comparison to make, that a big part of the similarity is Sandfort being able to get these shots off quickly and being able to start to create them for himself. We're seeing from Peyton, just the way that we've seen from Caitlin, that there are ways for forwards or like larger guards, wing players essentially, to be effective rebounders in an up-paced small ball system. Like, Sandfort is not getting double-digit rebounds. Like, he's been a great rebounder this year, but it's not because he's in there banging with 6'11" guys and trying to, get those rebounds at the rim. It's more of a, like, sort of a Russell Westbrook situation where you organize a way to, or excuse me, you orchestrate a way for this dynamic ball handler slash shooter to get the defensive rebound, get them moving up court, and all of a sudden your transition game is already in effect as soon as the ball is in the right person's hand. And Iowa women have done that in to tremendous effect with Caitlin. We're seeing Iowa men do it to tremendous effect with Peyton Sanford. So I love the fact that the coaches not only, were confident enough to make that comparison, but how good of a comparison it is. Like Peyton is not all everything the way that Caitlin is. They vary in terms of overall greatness, but stylistically, there's a lot of similarity there. And I'm glad that they were able to notice that and sort of work on that or work with it. And I think Iowa fans are also happy that KSU maybe didn't take that warning seriously enough based off of what Peyton did in those first 7, 8 minutes, because he was absolutely unconscious and playing the game in a like this has all slowed down for me. Like he looked like basketball Neo out there at a few points. Like that was a guy making the leap. And you know who it really reminded me of, especially in this whole situation? Do you remember when Matt Gatens just absolutely detonated down the stretch for Iowa? I think it was Aaron White's freshman year, maybe his sophomore year, but it was early in the Fran era. And Gatens had always been a pretty good perimeter shooter, had some pretty good, inside the arc skills too. And then he just went off for I should have pulled up the stats, but it was what 14 for 20 in this last 3 or 4 regular season games. It was something like that. And it felt very similar to what we're seeing out of Peyton here. That not only is he hitting just ridiculous shots, his shot making is on another level, but his playmaking, even without the ball in his hands or even outside of shooting, is reaching this level of like, oh, this is how I become a great basketball player. Like I'm playing the best basketball of my life right now, and I can build on this. So keep your fingers crossed that Sanford doesn't get swayed by the NCAA or excuse me, by the NBA in this whole scouting process between now and the start of next season. Because if he's back in Iowa City, I think he's in line for a tremendous year next year. Eliot, is that consistent with what you've gathered?
Yeah, I think where he's at is typically in terms of being mocked is like middle of the second round, mocked
Yep.
in the NBA draft. And so that's a situation where you probably go through the process and then come back and hope to end up in the first round because that's a significant increase in your value to a franchise and probably your paycheck.
Yep.
So for Peyton to do that, I think would be incredibly smart. And next season, you hope Tony Perkins comes back because that alleviates some of the pressure on you. Cooper Koch, Chris Tajo coming in, and they're going to be contributors. You hope Owen Freeman takes a leap. You hope Price Sanford takes a leap, and you hope Brock Harding takes a leap. That would all be a lot for all of them to do that. And of course, you hope that they dip into the portal and get somebody some other player who can take some of that pressure off as well, because Peyton can shoot lights out. I think we see the mold as well in the NBA right now with another Iowa connection, which is AJ Green. He had to do everything at UNI, and now he's allowed to just be a shooter at Milwaukee, and he does the value things where he takes a charge on defense, and um, I think that's a perfect thing for Peyton to be at the next level. Is to really bring all his value at shooting because he won't have to do as much, and he's become a better defender. So I think that tracks for him as well. As far as the rest of the NIT, they'll travel to Salt Lake City, probably play on Sunday. I don't think that's been released yet. And then after that, it's Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indiana. And if they make it that far, and based on what we saw last night, this team has the chance to do that. Of course, they had their runs. I think they went 4.5 minutes without scoring in the second half, which can't happen if you're going to play against some of the better teams in the NIT and they're just as motivated. But we'll see if the Hawkeyes can take an NIT title out of this and maybe take some momentum into next season. We'll see how that shakes out. But Just a little bit to go. Of course, the women taking on UT Martin and Holy Cross.
Holy Cross.
They haven't
Yep.
played yet, right?
Nope, that is
Tomorrow.
tomorrow. Yep.
Tomorrow in Iowa City, correct?
Yes.
In
Carver
Iowa
Hawkeye
City.
Arena.
Yes, Carver. So we will see how that shakes out. And that first round game for the women will be on Saturday.
On Saturday at 2 p.m. Iowa. The email that we had gotten from Iowa as soon as it was announced said 1 p.m. CT. So for those who saw that post on the free board, it is confirmed 2 o'clock. It will be on ABC for those who were not able to get tickets to that game. But yeah, it will be Iowa versus the winner of Holy Cross and UT Martin. One other really quick thing that just came down the pipeline for Iowa women's basketball. Actually, two things just to for housekeeping. One, Iowa will be playing Tennessee at the Barclays Center next season. In December, there's going to be that classic that gets held there in Brooklyn. So Iowa versus Tennessee. And then the other game there is going to be UConn versus Louisville. And then something that was just hit our inboxes. Caitlin Clark was named the Sporting News National Player of the Year. No surprise there. I mean, she's going to sweep the National Player of the Year awards deservedly. And I don't think it's going to be close on any of them. But yep, that is official. First team All-American, National Player of the Year, Sporting News, Caitlin Clark, and she joins ESPN or Sporting News joins ESPN and The Athletic in naming her National Player of the Year. The big awards will be coming closer to Final Four and the postseason.
There you go. Beat writer Adam Jacoby on the women's news there. Of course, you can follow along with all of our coverage of women's basketball, all of us on Twitter, and of course, Adam and Braden Roberts. They both do an incredible job covering the women. And of course, you can always check out our content at iowa.rivals.com as well. We will have more content on visitors for the spring football, Kadyn Proctor situation, and more at iowa.rivals.com. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can do that today at iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. We would love to have you. We will wrap it up here. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Hawkcast brought to you by iowa.rivals.com. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you're thinking about this whole Kadyn Proctor situation. Did we cover all the basics of it? Did you think there might be another reason why he's out in Iowa City? Let us know what you're thinking there. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you might be listening but not subscribed. So make sure you do that today. Leave that rate and review on Apple Podcasts as well and Spotify. It helps us out a lot and it makes us very happy. My name is Eliot Clough at Eliot Clough on Twitter, joined by Ross Binder and Adam Jacoby for this episode of Hawkcast. And for now, we see you next time.